Hello designers! In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can take a very basic template and demonstrate typographic hierarchy by editing some of the basic settings of the text in your template. We are going to demonstrate typographic hierarchy by taking our text and editing things like the size, the color, the fonts, things that are going to help us create an order of importance to let our viewers know what is the most important element within our flyer and basically be able to lead them through the design. So here you have a pretty boring flyer for a cookie shop business, okay? You have the image of the cookies that we're taking from pexels.com. This image does not belong to me. And then you have some text, and you can see that all of it is in the same size, the same boring Calibri font. And it's all formatted exactly the same way. So our job is to basically take this text and transform it so that viewers will want to go visit this business, because that's our job, to advertise it and basically to make it more appealing visually. This example right here is more in tune of what I would like you guys to do for this project. Although I'm gonna remind you guys, I don't want you guys to copy me. I want you guys to use the skills I'm gonna show you to create your own variation. Now, using the exact same template you guys are using right now, I'm actually demonstrating typographic hierarchy here by pointing out that the business name where it says O'Connor's Cookie Shop is the most important element here. And I made that the most important element by basically editing the text, selecting a big point size so that your eyes automatically go to where it says Cookie Shop, selecting that really beautiful whimsical display font that looks like a chocolate chip cookie, using a gradient overlay effect so I can have that really subtle, blend from the browns to the beiges to reflect the actual color of the cookies. And then progressively, you can kind of see how it goes down in different levels. So Cookie Shop here would be my first level. Then my second level in the typographic hierarchy would be right here, the subheading that says delicious homemade cookies, pastries, and so forth. My third level would be right about over here. The information that patrons would need to know about where to visit the bakery and find them, basically. And I also included a little bit of Instagram information here, which I totally made up just because I wanted the flyer to feel a little bit more modern and contemporary. I added an extra image just to give it a little bit of extra oomph, but you guys will have total artistic license to add another image if you want to, or just leave it a little bit more minimal. So let's get started. So I have the very basic template here. Before I do anything to the image, to the background, before I start selecting fun fonts, what I really want to do is I want to establish typographic hierarchy through the size. So I want to figure out what is my level 1, and my level 1 is going to be the largest block of text. And I know I want it to be where it says O'Connor's Cookie Shop. So I'm going to select that layer. By the way, I'm using Photoshop, but you can easily follow along on Photopea here if you're working from home. And with that layer selected, I'm just going to go and select my type tool and click inside the text, Control A to highlight. And I think I'm going to make the text box just a little bigger so I have a little bit more room to play with, since I know this is going to be a block of text that I want to emphasize and make bigger. And before I start going and selecting fonts or doing any of the fun stuff we enjoy, I actually just want to go and start playing around with the size of it. So you can see it's set to 14 points. If I go and drag over the double T's, or basically just says size in Photopea, I can kind of eyeball it and get a sense of what that's going to look like if I don't necessarily have a point size in mind. So it's a little bit hard to see where it overlaps the image, so I'm just going to go and select a different color for it by just clicking on that little swatch in the options bar. And instead of selecting a random color, like let's say bright red, I'll actually go and drag over my image, and that little eyedropper is going to pick up the color within the image itself. So you can see it's matching that little oatmeal color of the cookie. So I'm going to click OK. I don't necessarily want to keep this color forever. I just want to be able to see what I'm doing, basically. So, okay. It's a little bit better. But I actually don't have my grid enabled right now. So I'm actually going to enable my grid if you guys don't already have it done so, by going to View and Extras. And you can see that the grid is basically going to help you just kind of figure out the placement where you want this to go. So I think I want to do something similar to what I did with the first flyer, where I made the O'Connors a little bit smaller and then I emphasized Cookie Shop. To do that, I'm just going to go and highlight the O'Connors part and just make it a little smaller. And then I really want to emphasize Cookie Shop. So I'm going to make it bigger. It's basically whatever you want to emphasize, just make it bigger. It's a pretty simple rule. Now you can see that there's a significant amount of space here between, O'Connors and Cookie Shop. So I'm just going to go and highlight it. And I'm going to toggle open my paragraph panel. I apologize, my character panel, which I can find if I'm on Photoshop by clicking right over here, this little icon that looks like a clipboard, and it's going to toggle over my character. Or if you're like on Photopea, for example, you can go and also find it by going to Window and Character. Either one is fine. By going to the character panel, I'm actually going to go and highlight my text and find the leading. And I don't necessarily have a specific point size for the leading or the line spacing. So I'm just going to drag my mouse over the little icon for leading and just kind of eyeball it. And play around a little bit with this orientation for O'Connors. I think I'm going to flush it right. I don't want any of the letter forms to overlap. I want it to look really professional. Okay, so that's a little better. I'm going to go to View and Extras so I can disable the grid momentarily so I can just kind of see what I'm doing. So right away, that's a huge improvement from the initial template because I was able to bring the viewer's attention to the actual title, right? Not the title, the name of the business in this case. Okay, so now time to work on my levels 2 and 3 in my flyer template here. So I'm just going to enable the grid again by going to View and Extras. Notice that there's these guides bordering the document. I don't want the text to go past the guides. In other words, I don't want the cookie shop to go past the guide like this because then I'm risking things being cut off from the final output, the final file, and I don't want that to happen, especially since I might want to actually promote this business with this actual flyer in print or online or what have you. So I want it to look really professional. Okay, next I'm going to be working on this subheading that says delicious homemade cookies and so forth. So I'm going to click on that layer, highlight the text, and play around with the size again. In fact, I'm going to need to basically increase the size of my text box here so it actually fits. Okay, so it's a little bit big. So this is just going to require some eyeballing on your part. There's no specific settings that I can tell you to set it to. I do want to avoid when I'm doing this having these large blocks. Let me disable the grid so I can actually show you what I mean. This is what I want to avoid. I want to avoid having these large blocks of like negative space right here and have one that like word alone by itself. this just looks off to the eye. It looks unprofessional. It looks sloppy. So whenever that happens, you want to either maybe move a line up so you can avoid that kind of like river of space, or you can basically play around with the size of your text so you don't necessarily have to deal with those rivers of type. We want to avoid those as much as possible. So this right here would be a solution. Is it perfect? No, but I'm going to keep editing it. Let me go ahead and enable the grid. I know it's a little bit hard to see when you're working with the grid, but the grid is really good to help you place things. Typically, if we were going to design a flyer like this, we wouldn't necessarily be using Photoshop. We would be using a program called Adobe InDesign, which is made for publications. But we don't have access to InDesign right now, so we're going to wing it with Photoshop. All right. I think I want to emphasize a little more this one line that says delicious homemade blah blah blah. So I'm going to increase the size of that like so. Something's overlapping here, so let me just move it down a little. And notice how I'm aligning things to the grid. I can see that the lighting's a little bit off. So once again, I'm highlighting, toggling open my character panel, and adjusting the lighting just by eyeballing it. I don't have a specific point size in mind. I think I might want to go and italicize where it says, ask about a party catering deals. Just to make it a little different. Okay. So let's go ahead and view that. And without the guides or the grid, I can see I'm already making significant progress. I have my level 1 here, and I have my level 2 here, and then my level 3 that I'm going to be working on right now. I can see that the subheading where it says delicious homemade blah 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 is a little bit close in size to where it says cookie shop, but I do have the intention of distinguishing the title that says cookie shop by selecting a really fun cookie font that I found on thefont.com. So that's okay. I'm just going to leave it as is and keep trying to establish hierarchy through just the use of, size. I'm going to work on the hours, and I'm going to work on the address. So for my level 3s in typographic hierarchy, I want to make them a little bit less noticeable, basically. My level 3s are my informative type, basically. These are things that are going to let the viewer know a little bit more about this business. Like, okay, this is the address, this is the hours, this is the Instagram account. So they're important. I just don't necessarily want them to be the thing that viewers notice them first. I want them to notice cookie shop first to just kind of reel them in. So I do want to keep the size of these blocks of text a little bit small, but right now it is a little bit too small. So I'm just going to go and eyeball the size, maybe set it to about 18 points, which is still small, so I can clearly see level 1, level 2, and level 3 here. But it just makes it a little bit more noticeable since I do have quite a lot of negative space to work with here. Okay, that looks good. I'm just gonna align it to the grid. Last night I was reading one of my favorite graphic design books, which is called White Space is Not Your Enemy. And I was going over the chapter where they talk about the no-fail layout, which is very similar to what you guys see here, where you have basically an image at the top and then you have different levels of type underneath. And they were talking about how the viewer is going to exit the design, if you will, on the right hand side, on the bottom right. So what I want to do is actually want to place the Instagram information on the bottom right, because the idea is that the viewer would start looking at this design right about over here, so where the image is, then gradually go down because you're guiding the viewer's eye by creating typographic hierarchy, and they would exit the design right about over here. Okay, this is someone who's, in the Western Hemisphere and actually reads from left to right. So that's exactly what I want to do. I want to make it easier for them to just kind of go through the design. Let me just increase the size of that slightly to 18 points as well. Again, I know I already said this. I don't expect you guys to copy me, but I do expect you guys to get creative and do your own version. So I'm aligning that to the text, and I think what I'm going to do is actually pull up an image of the Instagram logo that I got off Google. And I know we're not supposed to look at Google for those kind of images, but there was no way for me to find the Instagram logo on pexels.com or any of those copyright-free sites. So one instance where it's going to be okay, at least for the sake of our design. So I'm going to select that image of the logo and paste it in and delete that background I don't need. Okay, looks good. So now I basically just have to resize the logo. Make sure you guys always hold down Shift anytime you resize an image. And just kind of place it neatly next to this text. All right, beautiful. Let's look at our template without the grid and the guide. So I'm going to go to View and Extras. And that is a huge improvement from the initial layout. In fact, I should have kept a duplicate of that initial layout so I could go back and forth and show you guys the before and after. But you can see right now I have a clear hierarchy, right? From my level 1s here, my level 2s, my level 3s, and everything is a lot more organized and a lot easier for the viewer to follow. Now that that work has been done, where I've established hierarchy, basically just using size, right? I am able to have some fun with it. I am able to go now and start playing around with the colors. I'm able to add a background, maybe some nice textures. I'm able to maybe do a little bit of image editing to the image of the cookies, maybe to brighten it up or to emphasize the cookies themselves. This is where I get to have fun with it, okay? So I think I'm gonna start off, I don't need the grid anymore, so I'm gonna disable the grid for now. I'm going to start off by selecting my background layer, and I want to select a color because I don't necessarily just want it to be white. And I'm going to go to my adjustments, new adjustment layer icon, and select solid color. And once more, I'm going to drag that little eyedropper over the image, and I think I want to pick up that beautiful oatmeal of the cookie itself. You can use any color you want. Just try to make it harmonious to the image that you end up using on your template. You're not forced to use this one image of cookies like I did. If you want to use this different one, knock yourself out. But I do want to see like a clear before and after. Okay, I think I like that one. Can always change it later by double clicking on that little thumbnail and just changing the color around. Like for example, if I want to warm it up, which I think needs to be a little bit warmer, I can always just change it later. All right, so although I really love the color and I think it's coming together, I think it would be fun to add a little bit of texture to the background. This is completely extra. This is just me being the maximalist that I am. And I'm just going to go and toggle open that new adjustment layer icon. And I'm actually going to select the pattern fill. And I know for a fact that there's a pattern under the color paper textures in Photoshop that I want to add to this particular flyer to just make it look a little bit like more textured and more homey, if you will. If you are working on Photopia, you are not going to have this selection of textures or patterns, so you can always just go to brusheasy.com and see what you can find to just kind of spice up your overall design. I'm going to scale up the pattern. You can see right there, it just has this kind of like gritty paper feel, which I love. Beautiful. And then I'm just gonna go and maybe just blend it with that color in the background. Maybe select the soft light blend mode or the overlay blend mode. I'm just gonna play around with it a little bit, perhaps lower the opacity just a little so that I can clearly see the texture, but so that it's not necessarily so distracting. Okay, I think that looks good for now. So let's play around with the image. I think I want to make the image go past the borders that I'm going to use Free Transform. I'm just going to bring the image outside of the borders here. Okay, looking good. I'm going to play around with the color of my blocks of type. So I have selected this really beautiful oatmeal color for the background. Because I selected that oatmeal color for the background, I think I'm going to need a lighter color to be able to distinguish all these different blocks of type here. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to italicize where it says visit us as, just because I want to make it a little bit different from the rest of the text. Alright, that's really coming together. So now that I played around with some of the colors, I think it would be fun to start playing around with some fun fonts. So I really am dying to use a font for the title. This is Cookie Shop, that actually looks like cookies, that I found on dafont.com. So I am going to highlight where it says Cookie Shop and look for that font. I'm just going to toggle open my character panel, and in my font selector, which is quite extensive, I'm going to scroll down until I find the Cookie font. There's a lot of good stuff on dafont.com, so I encourage you guys to look around and find some kind of display font that you might want to use on your own flyer design. You can see when I change the font now, it kind of goes past the borders and the lettings all messed up. So I'm just going to play around with those settings within my character panel here and fix that up. Remember that when you go and change fonts, it's going to change the size as well, or not necessarily the size, but it's going to change the way that it looks. This 10 points is not the same every time, okay? So you gotta do a little bit more editing if you go and change the font. Okay, that looks really fun, and I think I'm going to spice it up with some layer effects as well. But before I do that, I want to play around with the typeface that I selected for the rest of the text. Right now it's set to Calibri, which is kind of this boring standard sans serif font. So I just want to play around with something that's legible, but that is still just a little bit more interesting. So starting with my subheading, this is delicious, homemade, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to go and highlight and maybe look for a serif or a sans serif that is going to complement the cookie font, but still going to be a little bit more visually appealing to look at. This is just going to take you guys going through your selection of fonts until you find something that you like. Okay, I found the font called Dosis, D-O-S-I-S, if I'm saying it correctly. Don't expect you guys to use the same one. In fact, I'll be very mad if you try to copy me. but I think it makes it a little bit more interesting to look at, and it does complement the rest of the design. So I'm going to keep using that font throughout for my level 3s as well. Okay, let me disable the grid again by going to View and Extras, and I can kind of get a sense of what it looks like now. I'm really liking it, although it looks like I'm going past the grid here. Yep, if you see how the P in Cookie Shop was going past that guide, I'm just gonna slightly shift it to the left so that I don't run into that issue anymore. And now I can go and start playing around with some layer effects to finish off my design, which is looking light years from the original, and I'm very excited that I've made so much progress in so little time. Remember that you guys will just need to experiment with all of these settings until you find something that just works for you. Alright, that's looking good so far. And now I'm basically ready to start using some layer effects. I'm dying to use layer effects on the word Cookie Shop. I know for a fact that I want to use a gradient overlay over the text to make it look like kind of like the burnt edges of a cookie and then the soft middle of the cookie. So to do that, I'm actually just going to go and select that layer where it says O'Connor's Cookie Shop, and I'm going to go to FX and select gradient overlay. You can always double click on the layer as well. Now I had been playing around with it before so that settings were changed, but having selected gradient overlay, I basically selected a 2-color gradient. You can select any 2-color gradient, a black and white for example, like so. And then you can just go and double click on the gradient stops, which is gonna pop open your color picker, and then you can drag over the image and then start matching up with the colors that are in the image itself. So again, I just want to match up with those oatmeal colors and those beautiful browns of the chocolate, so I can make it a little bit more harmonious and more fun to look at. So I think I'm really liking that. I'm going to click OK. And I think I want to play around with maybe adding a really small stroke around Cookie Shop. And I think I'm going to match the color again to one of the colors used in the cookies itself. Most designers are going to caution you against using the stroke effect, but I don't know, call me tacky. I just like stroke. As long as you keep it subtle, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So I'm going to keep it around 5 pixels, which just for me helps to call your attention to it more. So I'm happy with it. Yeah, that definitely helps. Okay, time to play with a few more effects to the rest of my type. So I think I'm going to add an effect right here to it. It says Delicious Homemade. And I think I'm going to go with a drop shadow. Be careful with the drop shadows. My students tend to overdo drop shadows. Drop shadows should be subtle, okay? So to be subtle, I'm just going to select a color that slightly matches so it has more of that oatmeal color, and then I'm going to decrease the distance and the spread because I do not want it to be distracting. So in other words, I shouldn't have this. It shouldn't be that obvious. It should not cast a reflection. Okay, So you can see right away that has been such an improvement over the original. When I was working on this flyer last, I had wanted to go and just add that little image just to make it a little bit more fun. So if you guys want to go and add an additional image, fine. Just don't distract from the main image that you're using to promote the actual flyer. So I had actually gone and selected this other image off pexels.com, and I think I'm just going to use the same one again. I'm using Control A to select, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste, just like I always do. And then I'm just gonna resize it. Always hold down Shift. I've told you guys this before. Oops, and it looks like it didn't follow my own advice, so let me try it again. I don't want to make my design look cluttered by any means. So if it means that you have to resize something, or it means that you have to move things around, that's fine. Just don't make your design look like it's basically running out of space for the things that are important to you. And just make sure I'm not going past the guides by enabling the grid, and I'm good. Disabling the grid again because I don't no longer need it, and I think I'm going to add a small stroke around this image to just make it look a little bit more like a Polaroid. So I'm going to go and add a stroke around it in maybe white or one of these cute oatmeal colors. And that right there finishes off my flyer design. So I'm really happy with it. I do see still a few little things that could use some work. Like right over here, there's some negative space that feels trapped. So I'm going to play around with the placement of the Instagram information, maybe the placement of the image that I just added. But overall, a huge improvement on the original. I definitely established 3 levels of typographic hierarchy. I made my flyer really interesting and fun to look at through the use of different colors and textures, and of course that amazing cookie shop font. And I'm pretty much ready to export the final draft. Now, if I was going to export a final draft for print, like let's say the O'Connor's cookie shop had hired me to create a flyer for print, I would want to go and export it in PDF format. If they wanted me to promote this flyer on their Instagram account or whatever the case might be, then I might want to go and export it in a PNG or JPEG format, so it makes it easier for people to see in all kinds of browsers and social media platforms. So just something to keep in mind. Think about the final output. I will have information on Canvas for you for how I want you guys to export your final draft. And with that being said, I'm pretty much done. So I cannot wait to see how you guys tackle this project and create your own original version of this flyer. You guys know how to reach me if you have any questions. Peace out.